All right, welcome to the Week 3 Forum. This week we are discussing the issue of federalism, which I think is a very complex and difficult subject for a lot of kids, a lot of students to grasp. I think a lot of Americans generally have difficulty understanding the role that federalism plays in our system. Uh, and so we want you to be able to describe how the Constitution structures the relationships among the national, state, and local governments. We want you to be able to explain the relationship between the federal government and state government, its evolution over time. And we want you to analyze the difference that federalism makes for politics and government. And I think, the text talks a little bit, I think, about the role that federalism played in the United States COVID response. That the federal government did certain things that both made the policy response more complicated and more and less likely to succeed. They also did some things that probably worked pretty well. And one of the things that they talk about is at the start of the chapter where they talk about the Trump administration allowing states to designate labs throughout each of the states or all of the states, to be able to expand testing, and that was probably the right call. Now there were consequences that came with that as well. That the more you spread out who's doing what and how they're doing it, many pathways can be to the good, but it can also produce pathways to the bad as well, to flawed testing as well. So quality control tends to go down, and so I think that really highlights the broad picture about federalism, that there are some things we want everyone to have access to on a relatively equal basis. And those are the things that we generally think that the federal government ought to be responsible for. But there are also lots and lots of things that the states are really good at, and the states are good at identifying what their specific citizens need. Each state has kind of a different mix of urban and rural and wealthy and poor, and they need to be able to identify the best pathway forward. So one of the things that's happened with federalism is that we went from a long period where the federal government was up here and it had its zone of sovereignty. The state governments were here and had their own zones of sovereignty. And there was really no kind of interpenetration. There was no real interrelationship. What happened really beginning with the Great Depression and going forward through the 20th century is the relationship between the federal government and the state governments. And ultimately, the relationship between the federal, state, and local governments becomes more and more complex because the federal government is using its awesome taxing powers to distribute money to the states and to the local governments to try and pursue national ends. And that has significant consequences for the nature of federalism. So we went from layer cake federalism, is what they call it, to marble cake federalism. Some people argue that what the Trump administration did in terms of fashioning a COVID response was more like fend for yourself federalism, where essentially they were basically saying to the states, you need to find the ventilators you need to find the personal protective equipment you need, and that made it a lot harder because many of the states don't have the same resources that other states do. California is a huge state. It's economy set aside from the rest of the United States would still be the fifth largest economy in the world, slightly behind or slightly ahead of India and slightly behind Germany. And so again, I think over the course of the week, let's identify aspects of federalism that we don't fully understand, and let's bring them to the forum, and hopefully I can help you out with them. I can't understand. I don't know what you don't know unless you tell me. It's sort of a challenge there, and to some extent that means you have to come to me, and you have to come to the class and confess, I'm having trouble understanding this, and that gives me a way of identifying which aspects of this chapter you're having difficulty with. So if you guys will do that, and I can hopefully help you out. So let's have a great week.